Hi everyone, Messi Coda back again with another part of my live dev interview with Mr. F, the creator of Bakery. That's why this was taken from my live Twitch stream, all the www.twitch.tv/themessycoda, where I chatted with Mr. F and we also gave away a copy of his amazing asset, that is Bakery, the GPU Lightmapper for Unity. So sit back, enjoy, and I'll see you all in a second. So what we got next is Sponsor Day. So what's Sponsor Day?
Well, sponsor is, if you don't know, it's like
Is that the rally thing?
So you need to rebake Lighten because there is a difference between automatic UV unwrap and between different versions of Unity. So it's just a different UV layout. So this Lightmap was baked using Unity 5, and when you open the same FBX model on Unity 2017, it just unwraps it differently. So your UV layout doesn't match your Lightmap. So if you rebake it, it should get fine.
If you rebake it,
so just an impossible problem to solve because UV layout is different between different Unity versions.
Wooden's asking, I have another question. Is it somehow possible to use the shadow mask mode but disable dynamic shadows on static geometry and only have dynamic objects cast dynamic light?
Well, yeah, you can just disable any kind of shadows on the Unity light, so you only get baked shadows and no dynamic shadows at all. It's just up to Unity. Everything about real-time shadows is just what Unity light component does.
How did I get to 55 so quickly? I'm at 2%, 3.
So you may have noticed that the scene disappeared.
Yeah.
When you
someone stole my scene.
No, it's just a checkbox in advanced settings that says that this scene should be unloaded before the bake started. And the reason for that is just because baking happens on the GPU and your Unity scene is also rendering on the GPU, and it may potentially take gigabytes of video memory, and that means baking may go out of this because baking may need a lot of VRAM, and so yeah, basically you better unload big scenes from memory before you start baking them, or you can just have not enough memory.
So how does Bakery play with other assets that are also using the GPU in the editor? So
which?
So we've got things like Cascade now that's moved over to doing fancy things with the GPU. You've got I think both Gaia and Gina are utilizing the GPU rather than the CPU.
Well, I think they should all work fine because what Bakery does in the end, it just generates lightmap textures, and they are just normal light maps for Unity. So Unity just treats them like if it would be baked by Enlighten or Progressive. So there's no difference. So if some other assets work with Enlighten or Progressive light maps, they will work with Bakery light maps too.
We've got a lot of people, a lot of French-speaking people in chat that I didn't realise beforehand. It just reminds me that I flunked out of French in school. All I can remember to say is Je m'appelle Messi Coda, j'habite my house, j'anglaise, and that's about it. I can't swear in French, which means it's not a real language. Unless I can swear in a language, it means I don't know it. So have you tried getting, because you said Bakery is engine agnostic, so could I use Bakery with Unreal, and have you tried using it?
Well, to use Bakery with some engine, you need to like write some big adaptation layer anyway. So you need to write like all the exporting code that would take all the meshes from the scene, all the textures, everything else, and convert it to Bakery format. You need to write code to import the results back. You need to write all the UI and controls. So it's kind of a lot of stuff. So it's not like you can just throw it to Unreal and expect it to work.
I bet you could do it though, couldn't you?
Well, I could, but
There you go. Have you tried?
no. I think there is some other guy who also made a GPU Lightmapper for Unreal. I never tested it, but I don't know. I'll just leave it to him.
Have you ever loaded up Unreal?
Yeah, well, I think just a little bit when yeah, my friend was making a game and I just wanted to help him with some single effect, like portal effect from the Portal game, basically. So I tried to implement it, and I did, but it was my only experience with Unreal.
So in that very brief experience that you had with Unreal compared to Unity, which one did you enjoy the most?
Well, I think I did enjoy Unity more because it's more extensible, even though Unity doesn't have source code. It also doesn't require you to have it in a lot of situations. But in Unreal, when I wanted to change something, a lot of times I had to change the actual engine code. Like, I want to render something with this near plane and this far plane. Okay, you have the far plane, but you don't have a near plane. Near plane is somehow a constant for all cameras in the game. It's global. So I had to go into the engine source code and make a new property for this thing that is not even a camera, but some kind of other component that renders the texture. So I added a near plane to it, and yeah, it worked. And I had to recompile the engine, and it took like an hour. So it wasn't really easy to use for.
It doesn't sound like it was a
graphics
fun
effects.
experience. Doesn't sound like you.
So what I would say is that Unreal has graphics out of the box in a better state than Unity. That's for sure. But if you're a graphics programmer or you just want to tinker with effects and do some crazy stuff, then you'll find that Unreal is also, it kind of dictates you the way things should work, and it's hard to teach it to work in a different way. So it has its own like gbuffer format for different rendering, and it will be very hard to change it, for example. So in Unity, it's easier to just drop something in the scene and write a shader for it, and just don't get any extra stuff.
I think I'm going to stick with Unity for a while then. Your story just put me off completely playing with Unreal now for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and just to make a shameless promotion, I would I would suggest using Play Canvas Engine for if you target WebGL, because if you target WebGL, it's like a WebGL first engine, and Unity doesn't have a good WebGL export, I would say.
So is there a website for that? For your shameless plug?
Well, Well, it's not my plug. It's engine playcanvas.com. You can check it.
Yeah, but you know, you recommend it obviously, given the history.
For WebGL builds, yeah, I would recommend it. I
I
made a game
haven't
with
played
it.
that yet. What was it like making your game? Was it difficult?
Given that I also wrote the engine, no. But actually, yes, because every time I make a game, I just invent challenges for myself. Like I want to write a physics engine from scratch. Why not?
Why not? Just do it.
Yeah. So whatever I do, it's never easy. So yeah, people asking about directional light maps in the comments, and I can say that unfortunately I didn't start working on them yet because like there was a critical amount of people asking for LODs, and I focused on them, and they are done now. And that means that around Monday or Tuesday, I think I will submit 1.3 version of Bakery, and then I will start working on directional light maps. Directional light maps are not going anywhere. They will be done.
This took like hardly any time at all to bake. Wow. So what is this scene? What is this? This looks familiar. This artwork.
Yes, it's basically a place somewhere in Croatia, I think, and it became famous because there was some public free model of this scene, and graphics researchers, they started using it to test lighting, and then also a guy from Crytek made like a more real-time friendly version of the scene, and yes, it became kind of a de facto standard for all kinds of lighting tests, like the generic test scene basically now, because an interesting property of the scene is that no matter how you rotate the sun, it will always have a lot of dark places which are only lit by indirect lighting. So it's a good case to test GI algorithms.
It's
and
in Drop Village.
Yeah, and on the colored certains, they also make it obvious how like a color bleeding, all the light bouncing works. So you have like a green bounced lighting. Yeah.
Oh man, it's like you were saying that you can really tell the difference when you've got a little bit more complex scene going on in the time it takes to bake. So in your tests when you're using Unity, I'm not going to do it now obviously because I don't want to kill my CPU and ruin the stream. But how long did it take to bake this in Unity? Without using Bakery?
Well, with Progressive, it took I would say around like 3 times longer for me. So not extremely slow, but still much slower. With Enlighten, I tried. I waited for like I don't know 6 hours, and then I just stopped it. So Enlighten is really not for baking light maps, I would say. Its main feature is like a semi-real-time GI that allows you to change lighting at runtime and see it like propagate into other places. But for just static light maps, you don't want to use Enlighten. It's just way too slow.
I gotta play with that. I gotta play with the night. I need to see what the nighttime one looks like. You got me all excited now. Evening. Can't evening.
You would need to rebake it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
I think you didn't actually open it.
No. Come on. Here you go. Here it is. Alright, so while we've got the advanced mode open, talk me through just all these many different options we've got here. So we've got light mapping tasks. We've got loaded tick boxes.
Yeah, so the tick boxes are like most of them are probably better to not mess with, especially the expert one. So yeah, the idea was that if you have a scene and you bake the light in, and then you want to just maybe change one light and see the difference without waiting the same time, then you can untick expert geometry and update unmodified lights, and then bakery would only bake this light that you did change and
cool.
and GI. But in practice, I think it broke this feature sometime, and it's not really popular. So I'll take a look at this. But anyway,
so if it's broken and nobody really likes it, you might as well just remove it.
Probably. Because if you change the geometry a bit, you will need to export it again and do everything again. So it's not really a very useful case. So yeah, just UV padding, it's an interesting one. So if you import a model in Unity and you press the generate lightmap UVs checkbox, that you can see it on the asset if you just select the asset, some model asset. But anyway, so yeah, just not the model in the hierarchy, but instead in the asset list.
Oh, what then? Yeah.
Yeah, just maybe select some model.
Where have you got everything?
It should be here. Yeah, just select the sponsor, for example, or a push. So there's a generate lightmap UVs checkbox that you use to automatically generate UVs, and there are like this advanced thing, and there is a pack margin. So what Unity does is it takes every mesh inside your model, and it generates like an isolated UV layout for each mesh. And in each layout, it inserts some padding, like some empty space between UV chats. And this pack margin property is basically the size of that empty space. But the problem is, when Unity packs Lightmap Atlas, or when Bakery packs the Lightmap Atlas, they do it in a similar fashion. So object size in the Lightmap depends on its surface area. So if you have a very small object, it will be like 32 by 32 pixels in the end, and a huge object will be like 1,000 pixels. But the problem is, if you have one pack margin value for all submeshes in the model, it will be not optimal. Like if you have a hole of the same size on a tiny object and on a huge object, then on a tiny object the hole would just squash into nothing. And the implications of this is that with default Unity bakers, you will get a lot of ugly seams and leaks and all this garbage around UV discontinuities on the objects, on the small objects especially. So what adjust UV pattern checkbox in Bakery does, it actually it first generates the Lightmap Atlas. It knows then how big is each model sub-object in the final atlas, and it will re-unwrap the model, and it only does it with automatically unwrapped models. So if you have custom UVs, it will not change them. But if you have automatic UVs, it will basically insert different pattern for small objects and big objects, so they all have like a constant pixel holes in the end, in the final light map, whenever they're small or big. So that means basically when you have a lot of small objects, they will look clean instead of just being garbage.
I was about to say that. I'm glad you said it. Sandra's saying, Mr. F, I'm going to follow your website so much. Amazing stuff we could learn from you. Like I said earlier.
Thank you.
This is like going to university. It's like having a quick college course. Is having a chat with Mr. F about lighting. Whenever I sit, I was trying to read the documentation for Bakery, and Captain Murphy on Discord, our very own Captain Murphy, was saying how every demo scene in Bakery has everything that you need to understand how Bakery works. And the documentation, he said, was spot on and perfect, covered so much information. He basically was able to read the documentation, and after playing about with the demo scenes, he was away and off like a rocket. When I sat and read that documentation, my eyes started to glaze over, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize how little I knew about everything. And just only when you sit down and you chat with Mr. F, you start, oh, now I understand. I'm beginning to understand it now. I see. Okay, that's starting to make more sense.
Yeah, so by the way, you can see that if you hover your mouse over any property, there is like a big help text.
Yeah, that's lovely.
If you ever
mention that's really nice.
If you ever forget something, just hover your mouse and it should explain it.
Bounces. How many times light ray bounces off surfaces? Lower values are faster to render, while higher values ensure light reaches highly occluded places like interior, caves, etc. Like, oh, now I know! Samples. Quality of the GI. More samples produce cleaner lighting with less noise. Talking about, there was a question in chat by D Niter. Can we read that one out? Do you mind? I know I'm being a little kid, but D Niter asks, does this work with real-time GI? Have you been asked that question before, Mr. F?
Yes. Well, so just to explain everyone in the chat, real-time GI has nothing to do with light maps. It's a completely different technology. Enlighten is famous for it, and it sucks for everything else. So yeah, Bakery doesn't do any kind of real-time GI, and it's not going to, because it's a runtime part of the engine. It's not something that you can bake.
There you go. I actually asked the same question the first time I was chatting to Mr. F, and I felt like hiding in a little corner after I asked that question. So how many times have you actually been asked that a week?
Well, in total, I think it was like 7 times maybe. Not in a week, but maybe if I just sum all times. But it's still a lot, I would say. Well, I can understand that just some people come with just different backgrounds. Some people know how lighting, at least in Unity, works by default, and some people just saw some buttons and they don't really know the way what's hiding behind them.
That's me to a T. I see buttons and I just push them and wait for something to happen. It's like I'm randomly pushing buttons in Unity. Go, what does this do? I can't see any difference. What is it doing? Why has my FPS gone down to 1? What's happening now? So that's me. That's me with Unity. I keep telling people I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. They don't seem to believe me.
While we're still talking, maybe you can rebake this scene, because...
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Do I need to do anything else while we're here? Playing with emissive boost, backface GI, play about my ambient occlusion settings?
Yeah, wait. If you press render, then all the settings will disappear. So you can choose between getting the lighting down or me explaining all the settings.
I'd rather hear you tell me what these settings are, to be honest.
All right. So if we just go up and continue with checkboxes,
Yeah.
so yeah, the validate UVs, it's off by default. I forgot why, but it basically will check if you have models with overlapping UVs, and it will show you a warning, like a small window saying that, oh, you have some objects with completely wrong UVs, maybe it's not right. So, but in some cases, you may think that it's right for some reason. So anyway, it is disabled by default.
How much extra time does it take to...
Yeah, the problem is it actually takes some extra time, like maybe, I don't know, a second, something. Maybe for a huge scene it will be more. But anyway, I didn't decide to enable it by default. So yeah, unload scenes before render. I explained it earlier. So it's just to like free up your video memory for the baking process, because when I try to bake the Unity so on Adam exterior demo scene, it took 2.5 gigabytes of video memory, and obviously it was a problem because Lightmapper also can take a few gigabytes of video memory. Yeah, so update unmodified and update modified lights is they are related to the export checkbox. It's just might try at giving you the ability to rebake some lights without rebaking the whole scene, but it doesn't work very well at the moment. And denoise and fixed seams they should be self-explanatory. So if you disable denoise, then you will get more noisy results, and there's no really any reason I can see why I should disable it. And same goes for fixed seams. Fixed seams are the like special algorithm that just fixes like color discontinuities that you have on UV seams when you have like a smooth surface but with different UV splits, and by default with any Lightmapper it would produce a visible seam on this place, and fixed seams eliminates it. It's cheap, I think, so yeah, no reason to disable it as well. So the next thing is texels per unit, and it's the same as in the lighting window, but it works a bit differently. So you see, you can't really strictly match texels to units, because objects can be like squashed, or their UVs can be very distorted. So it's not like you can absolutely directly map texels to units. So there should be some approximation involved, and this approximation differs a bit between Unity and bakery. So if you have the same scene and you bake it with like 20 texels per unit with bakery and with Unity Lightmappers, the resulting actual resolution can be different. So it's not like you can make a one-to-one comparison saying like, oh, it's like same settings, then it should be the same time and the same resolution, but it's actually not the case. So it may differ a bit, but not radically. So max resolution and min resolution. Actually, the min resolution is the upcoming feature. It's not exposed in 1.2, but they are related. Basically, what is the maximum resolution of the Lightmap, or the minimum resolution of Lightmap? So if you have, well, I think it should be obvious anyway. Like if you have small maximum resolution, then Bakery will never generate light maps bigger than this size. If you have large mean resolution, then Bakery will not generate light maps smaller than this size. So it just some tweaking.
Yeah,
So
that's clear enough.
So bouncings and samples, you just read them out loud from tooltips. So it should be now obvious. Yeah. Emissive boost is just a multiplier for all emissive surfaces in the scene. So instead of going to each material and modifying emissive intensity for each material, you just can tweak this one number. It's useful in some cases. Backface GI is a special new thing from 1.2, which makes light propagate like through front of the face to the back of the face. So if you have like a just one-sided plane, like a list of piece of paper or a leaf on a tree, something like that, something that you would use with a two-sided shader, for example, then if the leaf on a tree is lit on top, it will like give some green lighting underneath as well. So it's like a cheap approximation of translucency. So ideally it should be set up for each material, but I'm going to add it later. Currently just a global setting. So ambient occlusion, I hate ambient occlusion because it's completely unrealistic like thing. It's basically an approximation of skylighting, but with limited radius. A lot of people ask for this feature because they kind of like it for the look and just because it fits their aesthetic. So I added it because it wasn't very hard. But personally, I wouldn't use it in any scene in my project.
Why is that?
Because it just breaks like the physical realism of lighting. It just adds darkening where it shouldn't be.
It's like what people think reality is rather than the reality of reality.
Yeah, exactly. I think like people, they get used to some effects that are constantly used in games, and ambient occlusion is very popular in games, especially the real-time one, because in real time you can't calculate real GI, you're very limited. And yeah, now people expect even baked ambient occlusion, just ambient occlusion everywhere, but lighting doesn't really work like this. I can understand when you use it for real-time objects because there's not much you can do on the GPU in real time, but yeah.
The nicest thing is it's good.
Exactly.
Ambient occlusion is good with grass.
With grass, yeah, because usually you don't usually bake grass. Grass is a very complex object, and using real-time grass with real-time ambient occlusion is fine by me. But if you have completely baked grass, then you could afford more realistic lighting behavior.
From saying that bloom is similar. It's not very realistic, but it looks pretty.
Well, if you speak of well, if you mean bloom the way it was in like 2006 games, then yeah, it was absolutely terrible. Everyone was using it like then people used SSAO, and yeah, it looked like shit. But anyway, today people are actually doing more physical correct bloom, so I'm not totally against Bloom, because you can actually do it right, and it actually has some physical meaning. So it's basically like a light scattered on a lens or on your eye. So it's not meaningless, unlike SSAO, and unlike ambient occlusion in general. And ambient occlusion is just something that does look like some sort of global illumination when you don't have a budget to render real global illumination. But when you have real global illumination, then there's no much reason for AO. So going to next setting, the AGI VRAM optimization. It's like a very big, complicated algorithm that allows you to fit very large scenes in video memory. So video memory is pretty limited. Even if today you can have cards with 11 gigabytes, I don't know, it still maybe not enough for a huge scene. And to make Bakery scalable, I had to implement a special mod it works a bit slower than when it's off, but it makes sure that for every Lightmap Bakery is trying to render, it only loads only necessary data in memory, so there's less chance that you can go out of memory.
Cool.
But most of the time, I think from my experience and from what I'm seeing from people using Bakery, most of the time you probably want to set it to auto or off, because you need to have a really huge scene. I actually took this evening sponsor and cloned it, I think 32 times.
Wow.
And in this case, it went over 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and I had to use this optimization, and it worked fine. Yeah, by the way, for everyone in the chat, you are looking at broken UV layout. That's why there are terrible seams everywhere. As soon as he will re-render the scene, it will look much better.
Shall I click that render button, or you just want to tell us the tile size?
Let me just tell us, yeah, because not much is left. So the tile size is, if you switch to the simple mode, the tile size will be renamed to GPU priority. So they're basically the same setting, but with a different, this is a more friendly name. Just tile size is a more technical name for the same thing. So basically, when Bakery is rendering a light map, it breaks it down into smaller squares, so it can process it square by square. And it's useful because, one thing, you can spare some video memory, because if you render just a square, then you need less information loaded in the memory. And another thing is that the smaller the square, the more responsive the system is. So I'm not sure exactly. I think on Windows 10 and 8, the system is equally responsive with all tile sizes, but at least on Windows 7, it seems like with a large tile size, you can really get the system unresponsive. Like your mouse will be moving in 1 FPS, and so this is something you need to decide for you. Are you okay with having 1 FPS mouse and not being able to do anything else when it's rendering, or not? So the default tile size is fine, so you can kind of do stuff when it's rendering, and it should be fast enough. You can up it more, and then it should be a bit faster, not much, I don't know, 5% faster. but then, yeah,
You can't really use your
all,
computer.
all other software can be slower.
Yeah.
So the temp path is where all the temporary data is stored, and currently it's not clear at all. So if you're suddenly seeing that your hard drive is like full of something,
It's your fault.
you can clearly just without any doubt clear this folder. Nothing there is ever reused after you render stuff.
Yeah, I blame you.
Okay, so the output path is where the light maps are stored in the end. So Unity by default just creates a folder with the same name as your scene and stores all the lighting data there. But Bakery allows you to choose where the files are stored. And the output texture type is like 99% of cases you want it to be set to Lightmap. I think that on Unity 5, in some circumstances, the default button produced superior quality.
Really?
I'm not even sure about it anymore. Perhaps I was doing something wrong, but anyway, probably I will probably actually remove this selector, and you probably never change it from Lightmap to
Just
default.
leave it on live. Don't give people the option to break things. I would just like to point out to people, like you were saying about this temporary path, I've only used Bakery for these 4 scenes. I haven't even baked this one yet, and that temporary path already was half a gig.
Yeah, I have it for like 50 gigabytes, I think.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
if you don't have much space,
yeah, you can just
careful.
go there and delete the folder.
So we don't have one magic button that does everything. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 big buttons, but this is the important one.
Yeah, because they are conceptually very different. So the render button is what Bakery actually does. It's the main focus of the project. It's baking light maps. Render selected is broken.
Oh, why didn't you rename render to let's get baking or something like that? Ready bake or get baking or bake or something that has the name bake in it because you're called Bakery. That'd be
maybe.
Awesome. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. So light props.
So what are you going to remove this button, the render selected, or are you going to fix its functionality?
Well, given that it's listed in my like asset store page and I call it a feature, definitely I will have to fix it.
I love that. Because there's somebody else who's got an asset that we played with recently that has a feature that's still listed in the asset store description, and instead of fixing it, they removed it completely and said it will be back later when we fix it, and you know they're never going to put it back. So I love the fact that you've left it in there to remind yourself, I need to fix this button.
Well, there is a specific way you can make it useful. So yeah, I can actually explain it a bit more. So you see, when you render the scene, all objects in the scene are split into lightmap groups. It's a purely concept of Bakery. So a lightmap group is just a list of objects and a single texture associated with them. So you can assign objects to lightmap groups manually. So you can say, like, I want this object and that object to be in one light map and not in the other light map. So this is something unique to Bakery and that you can't really do with built-in light mappers.
Where do I modify that? Where's that?
You need to add a special component on the object. It's called Bakery Lightmap Group Selector.
Let's go to this one. Here it is.
Yeah, so by default, all objects that don't have the component or their parent objects don't have the component, they are like automatically split into some imaginary lightmap groups. So in any way, all objects belong to some group, and each lightmap is basically a result of baking this group. Sorry if it's a bit confusing, but anyway, the problem is when you hit render selected at the moment, one thing is that it doesn't rebake the object that you selected, but it rebakes the whole lightmap group of which it's a part of. So if you have one object with a dedicated lightmap group, then render selected will work for this object only. Yeah. If you have like 3 objects with one lightmap group and you render selected on just one of them, all 3 will rebake. And if you have objects without any lightmap groups manually assigned, like the most of the scene, I actually have bushes in their own group, but everything else is like automatically split. So yeah, if you're using render selected on something that doesn't have a group explicitly described, then it will rebake the whole light map this object is a part of. It doesn't mean it will rebake the whole scene, just one of the light maps, but still it's not completely the way people expect it to work. And
I can fix your bug in 3 seconds. Do you want me to fix it for you?
How?
Rename that button render light map group instead of render selected. There you go. Bug fixed. You're welcome. Checks in the post.
And there are actually some other problems with this feature. So for example, if you have a scene and you didn't bake it at all, so it's black, for example, just and you have one object with one group and you want to render it separately, then it will work, but you won't have any GI from the other scene, from other objects, because
it wasn't part of the same group.
Not exactly. So groups can cast global illumination to each other.
Okay,
it's not a
cool.
problem. It's not a problem, but the problem is basically when global illumination is processed, it reads previous direct lighting and previous bounces from already baked light maps. So basically light map is bounces itself, and if you have unbaked objects, they don't have information that can be propagated to the one object that you bake. So it will be not exactly the same way. It will not look the same way as if you would bake it with the whole scene together. And it's something that hard to fix given the design, but maybe I will come with something. So yeah.
Barok's asking, what's the advantage of specifying your light map for certain objects?
Yeah, so there's certain situations when you want it. So one situation is actually render selected is a good example. Another good example is when you want to really control your memory. So for example, you have one room in one asset bundle or something like prefab, and another room in another asset bundle. Basically, the idea is that you can make sure you have some part of your level using just 1 or 2 light maps. Then you can predictably stream when you need them, and when you don't need this part of the scene, you can unload this light map safely and make sure that it's not used on other objects. So the problem with the way Unity generates atlases is it can make an atlas containing objects from all over your world. So it's kind of you can never unload the Lightmapper from memory because it's used on everything on one point of the scene or on a completely different. So yeah, it's just a nice way to keep your level in separate lightmaps.
You've invented your own best practice now for people handling lighting in their projects. Because now everyone who's got bakery is sitting there making everything nice and organized, having game object and asset groups now of, okay, these stuff are going to be in this light map group, that stuff is going to be in that light map group.
Yeah, well, I would say
like, you can use something streaming like Spectre, whatever it's called, Spectre, and then, like you say, like unload that light map group, and then jobs are good.
Yeah, well, I would suggest to not use any light map groups when you're like
learning,
prototyping, and just trying different level layouts and all that stuff. So you don't really want to mess with groups at this point. But when you are ready for production, for shipping the game, and you want to make sure you don't waste any light map space, then you can optimize it with groups. So it's not like you. Oh, another interesting feature of Lightmaps is that it's the only way you can specify that some objects use a Vertex Lightmap. So.
Like we saw in the other scene.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I can tell you about Vertex Lightmaps. There are also a lot of things about it. So I think it's safe to rebake the scene finally, so you don't show people terrible artifacts.
All scenes must be saved. Let's do it. Save it now. Yes, save it.
Yeah, it's because you have this unload scene checkbox. It means that if it has to unload the scene and load it back, then it has to save it.
Yeah, it's loading back to the last saved one, isn't it? Otherwise, you're just going to lose all your changes that you made.
So about Vertex Lightmaps. So yeah, Vertex Lightmaps are just light and baked in vertices instead of textures, and it's very useful for, especially for high polygon objects when you know you have a million polys object or even like a 2000 trees object. Even if you try to press the generate lightmap UVs checkbox in Unity, it will try to unwrap it in a terrible way for a few minutes, because very high polygon objects are pretty bad case for unwrapping and light mapping in general. And the vertices are often sufficient to store lighting instead of textures. And also vegetation models are a good case, because they often have some kind of weird shapes.
I was going to ask you, how does this work with speed tree?
I actually didn't test it. So, well, I was using speed tree, but I was just exporting models as FBX, so I'm not sure how it works with actual speed tree. I know it works with how do you call it, another tree system in Unity. Like if you just go to game object create tree, whatever it creates, it should work fine with bakery. Yeah. So about Vertex Lightmaps, the one problem with them is that you need a shader. Because default Unity shaders, they just don't know how to read lighting from vertices. So Bakery comes with a very simple Vertex Lightmap shader that doesn't have any additional lighting, and currently it doesn't support shadow mask. But for everything else, you can use this shader. Yeah. So ideally, I would like to make something that resembles a standard shader of Unity, but with the Vertex Lightmapping ability. But so far, it wasn't easy, because when you make a shader like that, it just breaks differently on different versions of Unity, because they change their shader include files all the time. So yeah, now it's fine. So some things about this scene is that green certains are emissive materials, and also this curvy thing on the second floor is it's a light mesh. So just another example of completely arbitrary shapes emitting lights, and it doesn't use an emissive material. It's using this light mesh component, and unlike emissive material, you can have a very high quality lighting with high quality area shadows, and it can be if you would make it much brighter and would expect it to like lit something a kilometer away, it will work fine without any noise.
Nice. I'm going to get in trouble if I don't ask this question, so I do apologize in advance. It's a question that a lot of people are asking as well. Mr. F asks Sanya, what are your thoughts on volumetric lighting?
Yeah, so it's not really related to lightmap baking, but in a sense you can say there is something common, because in Unreal they did a very interesting thing with volumetric lighting. They actually made their Lightmapper to bake like points and just basically like light props. But their volumetric lighting, it's sampling these points that are baked with the Lightmapper. And so, for example, if you have a cave, then there will be no bright volumetric lighting inside the cave, but it will be bright outside of the cave, because the lighting itself is lit by Lightmapper props. So it was just my thought of how you can make Lightmapper related volumetric lighting. But speaking of existing volumetric lighting assets, well, there is nothing preventing you from using them with Bakery, but nothing fancy to expect.
I love this scene.
Yeah, you can probably hide the awful text I put there. So
No, I want to read it.
Distract
This scene
you.
demonstrates complex auto-unwrapped geometry lit by skylight and GI. There's also curved light mesh and curtains using standard emissive materials. Note, if lighting looks broken, it might be because of different UV unwrapping differences between Unity versions. Rebake the scene to fix it! Well, you would bake it anyway. That's the whole point of coming in here, isn't it? I returned to the stream just moments ago. I do not know. Sonia, we answered the question now. What is that? What is what? This? This is King's Landing in Games of Thrones. This should have taken a lot longer to bake. It doesn't feel natural using your GPU. It doesn't feel like something Unity does. It's very beautiful, the lighting in this. It feels very, very real.
Another problem with Unity Lightmap bakers is that Unity Light attenuation itself is kind of broken at the moment. So I think they sort of fixed it in the new high definition render pipeline. But in most Unity versions, all lights have incorrect non-physical attenuation. So on Baker light components, you have to checkbox option to use real attenuation, like an inverse squared one, or to use the one Unity uses. And yeah, you can sync both real-time lights and bakery lights in terms of attenuation.
Are you enjoying Unity 2018?
Well, I think it looks like they kind of broke multi-sampling. I'm not sure, just couldn't enable it back for some reason. But also for some reason Unity 2018 sometimes crashes when I'm not doing anything at all. Like it just minimizes it somewhere, and I'm just browsing internet, doing completely unrelated things, and suddenly Unity crashes.
And you get that little screen saying, "Would you like to report this crash?"
Yes.
Like, could you repeat what actions you were doing? Well, I wasn't doing anything. What are you talking about? Yeah, I saw that one just today as well.
In 2017 or
18. But 2017's crashed quite a bit for me recently as well. Not too sure what I'm getting up to.
What I really like about
Oh, you've gone quiet. I think your cable's gone loose.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Is it fine?
A little bit quiet still. You're not in the yellows. There you go. Your mms are getting louder. That's a good mm.
Sounds good.
There you go. You're back.
Cool. So what I was yeah. So in 2018 they added an interesting thing, the scriptable render pipeline, basically. So that allows you to kind of write your own way of rendering. So yeah, that's something I was waiting for quite some time, because default Unity render pipelines are absolutely awful in my opinion.
Yes. You're not going to get any arguing that one, are you? Is it? But it's a bittersweet pill though, isn't it? 2018, because like you said, they are trying to work on their own GPU Lightmapper. So as every improvement they make for 2018, it feels like you got competition knocking on the door, waiting to.
Yep.
So I don't mean to depress you.
I know. Well, I don't know. Well, what I want to do is to add more useful features. I expect a lot of people will probably just not use bakery because simply because they just would trust Unity more than some guy from the store. But on the other hand, I can add something that Unity don't have time to add, like better directional light maps. Because even though Unity has directional light maps, there are multiple ways to do it, and I know much better ways than they use. And a lot of other stuff, like I really want to add some easy way to like marking some objects and saying I want multiple light maps for this object. Like I want light maps in daylight and in sunset, and one with door open and one with door closed, and then I would be able to just interpolate them at runtime. I think it would be pretty useful for my own projects. So I will implement stuff like that.
Okay, that's it for this part of my live dev interview. I hope you enjoyed it, had some fun. The next one is just around the corner. Don't forget, if you do like these videos and you want to see more, click on that big juicy red subscribe button that's down below. Tell all of your friends, your neighbours about the Messy Coder, who streams live every Fridays and Saturdays on all the w's.twitch.tv/themessycoder. You can catch me 9 PM UK time. So if you do like it, click it. Till next time. If you want to see more of my crazy videos, click on the left side of your screen now, and down below there's that big juicy subscribe button, and right next to it is the magic bell that if you click it, it will tell you if I've got a new video coming out. Till next time.